Can a world champion ignore team orders? Lewis Hamilton has not only done it, but has made it clear that he does not plan to apologize for it. Is this the spark that Ferrari can set fire inside? During the Miami 2025 Grand Prix, the atmosphere inside Ferrari's box became dense and loaded with tension when Lewis Hamilton, in the middle of the final phase of the race, requested the team that allowed him to advance his teammate, Charles Leclerc. The context was technical but not less. Hamilton rolled with freshest middle tires, while Leclerc did it with more spent hard. At that time, the difference in rhythm could be decisive to reach Kimi Antonelli, who marched ahead with his Mercedes. However, Ferrari took to react, which caused Hamilton to express his frustration with a phrase that was recorded in everyone's memory: "Take a cup of tea while deciding." That statement, loaded with irony, was much more than a tactical criticism. It was a warning signal. Hamilton made it clear that he is not willing to wait for late decisions when he feels that there is a real possibility to compete. Eventually the order arrived. Leclerc gave the position and Hamilton launched Antonelli's hunt. But the lost time turned out to be too much. He could not reduce enough distance with the Mercedes pilot before the checkered flag, which left the team in an even more complex strategic situation. With the opportunity already faded, Ferrari ordered to invest the positions for Leclerc to recover its original place. This second instruction came under a cloud of uncertainty. It was not clear if Hamilton had been duly informed or if he simply complied with the order at a time of resignation. What was evident is that this decision's change showed how delicate the management of two elite pilots when both are in direct struggle for results that could define the course of a whole season. This double change of positions was not only a maneuver on the track, but a palpable evidence of the latent conflict between the individual interests of the pilots and the strategic objectives of the team. Ferrari, historically accustomed to imposing clear hierarchies, must now maneuver with a world champion who does not accept orders lightly. What happened in Miami could be the beginning of a much deeper narrative about leadership, power, and ambition within the most legendary team of Formula One. After the race, Lewis Hamilton soon went out to defend his position. His words did not leave interpretations. "I will not apologize for being a fighter. I will not apologize to continue wanting to win." It was a direct message, without filters and with a clear recipient. All those who expected from him a more submissive attitude within his new environment in Ferrari. Hamilton made it clear that his ambition remains intact, and that he does not plan to change his essence just for dressing red. For him, victory is not an option, it is an obligation, and any opportunity to achieve it must be used, even if that implies tensing the rope with his team. The seven-time world champion was even more specific by explaining his words by radio. According to him, it was not an uncontrolled emotional outburst, but a reaction measured to a frustrating situation. "I felt that I had the rhythm and the tires to fight for more, but the team took too long to respond." In the heat of the battle, he expressed his discomfort in an ironic way, but made it clear that, if he wanted, he could have been much more aggressive. "I could have said something much worse on the radio," he said frankly, suggesting that his reaction was contained within the pressure standards that a pilot lives during a race. Hamilton also offered a broader look to the emotional context that pilots within the car. He assured that the pressure is so intense that transmitting a peaceful message while competing to the limit is practically impossible. Each decision made at more than 300 kilometers per hour is accompanied by an adrenaline level that distorts the way in which frustrations are communicated. His message was not just a personal defense, it was a claim of competitive nature that defines the great champions. It was not about disobedience, but of intensity, of that internal fire that still pushes him to look for every thousandth. With this statement, Hamilton not only closed Miami's chapter in its own way, but also drawn a clear line on how he hopes his role in Ferrari. He is not there to fulfill a secondary role, or to limit himself to being a decorative figure. He is there to win. And that inevitably means that any obstacle that perceives in its path will be faced with the same determination that led him to conquer 7 world titles. The Scuderia must decide whether that unwavering character is a threat or an opportunity to return to the top. The Miami incident is only the tip of the iceberg in a relationship that, since its inception, promised to be as explosive as fascinating. The arrival of Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari is not a simple team change. It is the frontal clash between two worlds. On the one hand, a pilot who for years built a figure of autonomy, leadership, and strategic freedom in Mercedes. On the other, a team with a rigid hierarchical structure, marked by traditions, protocols, and a story where control from the wall has been a constant. This difference in philosophies is intended to generate friction. Hamilton enters an ecosystem where each movement has a symbolic and political weight. and where the margin of personal maneuver is much more limited than it used to have. Ferrari has demonstrated in the past a huge sensitivity when it comes to internal conflicts. Cases such as those lived with Fernando Alonso or Sebastian Vettel are testimony of how difficult it can be to integrate dominant figures without the balance of the equipment being compromised. In this context, Hamilton represents a major challenge, not only because of its status and experience, but because it arrives with a mentality forged in independence and in decision-making. The tension seen in Miami could climb if clear limits are not established from the beginning. Or worse, if those limits are ignored by a pilot who is accustomed to leading from cockpit and not from blind obedience. But this situation also opens a door to an evolution within Ferrari. The team has been fighting for years to recover its competitive identity, and perhaps what I needed was no more discipline but more rebellion. The figure of Hamilton, far from being a threat, could act as a catalyst for an internal transformation. If the team manages to channel that competitive energy instead of suppressing it, it could break with years of rigidity and strategic errors. Integrating the vision of a champion who challenges orders when he feels that there is a real chance to win could be the first step towards a new version of Ferrari, more agile, more brave, more willing to risk. Of course, for this transformation to occur, the relationship between Hamilton and Leclerc will be fundamental. Two elite pilots with personal ambitions sharing the same garage. While until now they have maintained professional respect, situations like Miami's are inevitable in a long season and loaded with pressure. Leclerc is already a consolidated figure within the team, and giving prominence will not be easy. If the Scuderia does not handle this pair well, the risk of an internal war is real. But if it manages to establish a balance, it could become the most fearsome binomial of the grill. Everything will depend on whether Ferrari is willing to evolve, or if he will continue to be the victim of his own ghosts. Miami's controversy has left Ferrari against a deep dilemma that goes beyond a simple equipment order. What happened has revealed a latent conflict about what kind of team wants to be Ferrari in this new era. A structure where pilots obey without questioning? Or an organization capable of adapting to the intensity and leadership of a pilot like Hamilton? This question not only defines the relationship with the British, but the competitive course of the team for the rest of the season. The way Ferrari responds to these challenges will mark if this alliance will be a revolution or an announced disaster. Letting these types of situations climb without control can have a devastating impact on equipment performance. The lack of clarity in decision-making, doubts about internal hierarchies, and where between pilots are factors that have historically stumbled for Ferrari at key moments. If the team does not establish clear protocols, if it does not align the vision of its pilots with that of its engineers and managers, the fight for the title could escape without even really starting. The margin of error in Formula One is minimal, and an internal management crisis can be as lethal as a bad aerodynamic update. However, within chaos there is also an opportunity. Ferrari has in his hands one of the most successful pilots of all time, with an invaluable experience and a winning mentality that few can match. If the team decides to listen more to Hamilton, integrate their ideas and adapt to its leadership style, they could become a more efficient, more aggressive, and above all, more competitive machine. This transition will not be easy because it implies abandoning entrenched practices for decades, but it can be the necessary step to break the cycle of frustrations that has marked Ferrari in recent years. In the end, everything will depend on Ferrari's will to evolve. This episode with Hamilton is not a problem to contain, it is an alarm signal that requires a strategic and mature response. The road to the championship is not only built with a good car or fast pilots, but also with a solid, flexible, and oriented equipment culture to win at all costs. If Ferrari fails to adapt to Hamilton's intensity, runs the risk of repeating the mistakes of the past. But if you get it, this could be the combination that finally returns them to the top of the podium. Having Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari is undoubtedly one of the boldest movements that the team has made in the last decade. His signing not only brought hope and media attention, he also came loaded with expectations and pressure. But with all that, his character also came. Hamilton is not a moldable pilot. It is a competitor with a forged identity in the fire of the high demand, someone who does not stop at the politically correct when it comes to seeking victory. That kind of mentality is a double-edged sword for any equipment. It can raise the assembly to a higher level or can break it from within whether it is not known. The scene in Miami is not an isolated incident, it is a symptom of what implies working with a figure like Hamilton. He will not give in for diplomacy, nor will he moderate his hunger for victory to avoid tensions. And this, although challenging, can be exactly what Ferrari needs to break with years of rigid structures, fearful decisions, and lack of audacity in key moments. Having a champion at home means facing uncomfortable moments, uncomfortable statements, and situations that will test the team's strength from the inside. The challenge for Ferrari is not to convince Hamilton to change, but adapt his environment to capitalize on his presence. Convert the intensity of the British into a collective advantage and not into a threat. For that, leadership, strategic vision, and, above all, the will to build a team in which all row in the same direction is needed. It is not just about managing egos, but about building a structure that respects and enhances the essence of its pilots. And when one of them is Lewis Hamilton, that task becomes as complex as promising. What is at stake here is not just a season, but the credibility of a project that aspired to return Ferrari to the throne of Formula One. If they succeed, it will be a story of transformation and success. If they fail, it will be another example of how even the greatest talents can be lost in the middle of the noise. Ferrari has a unique opportunity. The question is whether they are ready to pay the price of having a champion at home and using it to be champions again.